Welcome to whofooadventures, part 7 of our Sedona Vegfest 2019 video series.
In this video, Dr. Saray Stancic shares with us the connection between diet and multiple sclerosis. Let's see what she has to say.
For the first time in my adult life, I considered the following question. Could there be a connection between diet and disease? Now, if anybody could answer that question, you think I'd be able to? I mean, I was a physician, 4 years in medical school, another 4 years as an internal medicine resident, another 2 as a subspecialist. That was a decade of my life dedicated to higher education in the field of medicine. And I couldn't think of one example in which one of my professors, mentors, or educators ever connected those 2 dots. But I remained curious. Maybe it was because I was desperate. I decided that I needed to look into the scientific literature and looking for answers. So I went to PubMed, which is a medical search engine. I typed in the words multiple sclerosis, diet, chronic disease, diet. And of course, what I got back was nothing short of remarkable. And this was one of the first studies published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1952, 67 years ago, by this gentleman, Dr. Roy Swank. And Dr. Swank was very, very interested in multiple sclerosis, and in this particular paper, he writes about the incidence of MS in Norway, which, by the way, has one of the highest rates of MS in the world. But when he drills down and he looks at the specifics of what's happening in Norway, he notes that there are geographic regions in which they have the highest rates, namely the inner farming dairy community, where they're eating a lot of butterfat, what he refers to as butterfat or saturated fat. Lots of animal sources of food, dairy. When he compares this to those that are living on the coast, they're primarily eating fish and vegetation, much lower rates of MS. So back in 1952, this gentleman hypothesized that somehow saturated fat was playing a role in the pathogenesis of multiple sclerosis. Now, Swank didn't just leave it at hypothesis. He actually started treating patients with MS with a low-fat plant-based diet. In Portland, Oregon, where he practiced medicine. And he followed 140 plus patients over 20 years. And he reported his findings in the Archives of Neurology in 1970. But he didn't stop there. He followed that same cohort an additional 14 years and ultimately published his findings in the journal The Lancet in 1990. So what did Dr. Swank learn after following 140 plus patients over 34 years? Those who adhered to the diet showed significantly less disability and lower mortality rates. Of those that survived, 95% remained physically active. 95% remained physically active. That really resonated with me. I was terrified of that wheelchair that my doctor kept bringing up. And it wasn't just Swank's work when I did this search in 2003. It wasn't solely his work that I yielded. There were multiple studies in the literature that clearly pointed to a connection between diet and MS. And I questioned, how was it that I, as a physician, had never learned this in medical school? How was it that I had the best MS doctor in the country, or at least one of the best? And why was it that he had never asked me about my diet? Why hadn't he ever discussed this with me? Could it be that he didn't know? Had I uncovered something that no one else knew? So clearly, I needed to talk to him. I made copies of all the articles that I had read. I highlighted all the excerpts that I thought were really important and relevant that I needed to convey to him. He sat across the room from me, and he patiently allowed me to say everything I wanted to say. When I was done, he walked over to me with a disappointed look on his face, put his hand on my shoulder, which is always a bad sign. He said, "Saray, do you really think that changing your diet is going to, in any meaningful way, change the course of this chronic neurologic autoimmune disabling disorder?" I said, "Look, I know you don't want to hear this, but what you need to do is you need to remain compliant with your disease-modifying therapy. In general, eat what you like. And if you want to blame anything for having MS, You can blame your genes because that's why you have MS. And there's nothing you can do about that. So I left this visit feeling quite deflated. Whatever hope I had conjured up had been swiftly washed away. But not for long. Because I started to think more and more about my doctor's parting words, "It's your genes." And it brought me back to an experience I had as an undergraduate at Rutgers University when I took a genetics course. And I remember the professor, one afternoon, excitedly lecturing on monozygotic twins. If twin A has MS, what is the likelihood that twin B would have MS? So my doctor was right, it would be pretty close to 100% it would be out there. So again, I turned to the scientific literature looking to see if anyone had looked at that. And of course someone had, and it wasn't 100%, it wasn't even 50%, it was 14 to 33%. So what did this tell me? This told me there were other variables involved in the evolution of this disease, that it wasn't just my genes. So some of that hope I had lost began to seep back in. Again, I turned to the scientific literature looking for answers, and that's when I came across the science of epigenetics. And epigenetics essentially tells us that gene expression is dependent on outside variables. So that means just because you have a gene doesn't necessarily mean that it will be expressed. That there are variables in our environment that are key and important in regards to turning them on or off. And what are the variables that epigenetics tell us are important? Are you ready for this? Diet and nutrition, physical activity, stress, alcohol, sleep. Sounds a lot like lifestyle medicine, doesn't it? So in 2003, I made the decision, it was not a popular decision, to come off of every one of those medicines responsibly, and I was going to focus on optimizing every aspect of my lifestyle. So the first thing I did was I adopted a whole food plant-based diet. Now, why did I do that? I chose a whole food plant-based diet because the overwhelming body of literature pointed to a diet rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds as being the ideal diet for optimal health. I started to exercise. Back in 1995, I was told not to exercise. It was falsely believed to exacerbate the disease. My husband bought me a stationary bike and would assist me to get onto it. And I could do a minute, and then exhausted and in pain, I would come off, and it would take 15 to 20 minutes to recover. But the next day I got back on, and the day after that. And little by little, I began to build stamina, endurance, and strength. Stress. I made it clear to my team at work, I was leaving at 5 o'clock. Unless there was a patient emergency, I started to delegate projects and clinics. I wasn't going to take on that extra research project. For the first time in my life, I was going to put myself first. It didn't happen in a week, and it didn't happen in a month, but over time, I started to feel better. Right around this time, my brother came to visit me. He hadn't seen me in a while, and he saw me free of the cane, smiling, leaner, happier. He was thrilled. He also had some good news for me. He had recently run the Los Angeles Marathon. He was bragging, showing me photos of the finish line. Towards the end of the conversation, he looked at me and he said, "I know this is going to sound crazy to you, but I think you should run a marathon." I got so mad at him. I looked at him and I said, "Are you kidding me? You can't run a marathon. I have multiple sclerosis." And I would say to him, that is the best gift he ever gave me, because saying those words out loud awakened me. I was living my life as this woman with MS first and foremost. And with that label came so many limitations. Things I could do and things I couldn't. On that day I realized I needed to drop that label. So my brother went back to Los Angeles, but he had planted that seed in my brain. And so without telling anyone, I went out and I tried to do a little bit of running, and it didn't go well. My balance wasn't good. I fell, scraped my knees. But I would heal and then try again. And every time I went out, I did a little better. There's this nature preserve right down the street from where I live. It's called the Celery Farm. It's small. There's a little body of water in the center and a trail that runs around its edge. you make it the entire way around, you've got 1.1 miles, so it's not big. But I remember the first time I made it the entire way around without falling or stopping, and I felt invincible. I picked up the phone and called my husband, and I told him, you know what, someday I'm going to run that marathon. I don't know when or how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it. And I'm happy to share that on May 2nd, 2010, I did cross the finish line at the New Jersey Marathon. And it was such an important day for me, not because I ran a marathon. It just validated everything I had done. And today, it's been 23 years since my diagnosis, and I am medication-free, disability-free, and empowered more than ever before to share this healing message.
Thanks for watching.
Don't forget to click subscribe for more Whoofoo content, including more from our Sedona Vegfest 2019 video series.